Okay. Okay.
Welcome to Psych Incubator and Eminent Psychotherapists Revealed. I'm Jeffrey Magnavita, and with my co-hosts Michael Albert and Kristen Osborne, we are very pleased to have as our guest this evening Deb Dana, who is a consultant, author, and specializes in complex trauma. Many of you probably know about her work, which is focused on using the lens of Polyvagal Theory to understand and resolve the impact of trauma, and in creating ways of working that honor the role of the autonomic nervous system. So we have previously, many of you have probably watched the recorded version or the live version where Stephen Porges talked about polyvagal theory. So this is going to be a wonderful follow-up, because what Deb has done is Deb has done an amazing job of taking polyvagal theory and giving us clinicians practical ways of actually utilizing polyvagal theory. I think most clinicians now probably know about polyvagal theory and use that to inform their treatment. But Deb has taken Dr. Porges' work and made it accessible to us and given us many techniques and many ways of understanding the importance of the nervous system in all therapy. So I'm going to open it up now to our co-host, and we're very happy to have you, Deb, this evening.
Okay. You know, I'd like to ask you how you came to this wonderful spot where you could use this knowledge about physiology, neurophysiology, and somehow apply it, because it's you can understand these mechanisms, and you can understand how trauma gets entrenched and people get kind of walled off, cut off, frozen. But how the different ways you use this knowledge to help people, and what that path was like for you, because I'm sure it didn't happen in an instant like the formation of the earth.
No. Yeah, that's a lovely place to start. I think I would start by saying I've always been a therapist who was a neuroscience nerd. I always had this sense that if I was going to be helping someone shape their brain differently, I should understand how it worked. And so I spent a lot of time studying the brain. And actually, one of my fondest memories was putting together a series where a number of social workers were able to go into the histology lab at University of New England and work with human brains. I mean, it was just an amazing experience for me. So that's where I started. And then I read Steve's book, his first book, which we lovingly call the Unreadable One, right? I read it and I thought, oh, here's the missing piece of the puzzle for me. Something moved into place. I thought, well, there's this whole other world that really made sense to me. And though I know you have all met Steve and talked with him, and your listeners who have listened to him know what a brilliant and yet kind and humble human being he is. And I reached out to him because back in those days, you could just find somebody's email and email them, and reached out to him and said, would you come to Maine and do a workshop for my colleagues? Because we just really want to understand that. And he said, I'd love to. I mean, who doesn't want to come to Kennebunkport, Maine? So in the summer, right? So, he and Sue came, and by that time, I had been driving my colleagues nuts by saying just what you said. Here's this amazing theory. I need to do something with it, because the theory is one thing, but what do I do with my clients? And so I was trying out all sorts of things, and the latter, which is my basic sort of way of inviting people into polyvagal theory, had been created, and we were using it and getting client feedback. And my colleagues were lovely in the fact that they were very patient with me, and they would try things on for me. They would see how they worked. They would give me feedback, and none of this would, ever have come to be where it is without, my wonderful colleagues, and without Steve's mentorship and now, friendship. So it was just one of those journeys that took off. Who knew where it was going? And I think that was 2013. So we're not that far down the road, but I look at it today and I think, wow, it's amazing how this work has made its way out into the world. And that is also it feels like I have a big responsibility. It's also very humbling to hear from people. I get emails every day from around the world from people who just want to let me know, oh, I used this or I tried this and here's what happened. And it's really, you couldn't dream this up, right? You just couldn't dream this up. So
Deb, here's what I desperately want to know. So we had Steve.
Yeah.
And I asked him, can you explain polyvagal theory? And he did. But what I would like you to give us a brief explanation of polyvagal theory from a clinician, because we know that Steve is not trained as a clinician. You're a clinician, and so can you tell us in clinician words what polyvagal theory is for the people who may not have seen it or don't know about it, or even for me who wants to hear it from the mountain?
Sure. I teach 3 basic organizing principles. I teach neuroreception, hierarchy, co-regulation. And if you understand those organizing principles, you understand polyvagal theory. So if, neuroreception is the nervous system's way of gathering information. And there are 3 pathways of neuroreception: inside, outside, between. So there's an embodied pathway, an environmental pathway, and a relational pathway. And the lovely thing for clinicians to understand is that neuroreception is working in the background, micro moment to micro moment, in these passive pathways. We call them the passive pathways. And until we can offer our clients enough cues of safety so that the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger, we can't do therapy. Right? Because the nervous system is going to, if it doesn't get enough cues of safety, it moves into a survival response, which takes us to the hierarchy. If we go there next, at the top of the hierarchy is the ventral vagal system of safety and connection. Right? And when we have enough ventral, we don't have to be fully immersed, but we have a toehold in ventral or enough, a critical mass of ventral circulating in our system, then we can engage. Our clients can engage with us in the therapy process. When neuroreception overwhelms them with cues of danger, they move one step down the hierarchy to the first survival state, which is the sympathetic state of fight and flight, anger, anxiety, right? That's where we go. When we leave ventral, we first go to sympathetic. That's the beauty of the hierarchy that Steve, has illustrated in the theory, that we know the pattern: ventral, safety, sympathetic, fight and flight. And that's this system of mobilization where we're overwhelmed with energy. It's chaotic, disorganized energy, so it's not useful energy for us, but it's the nervous system attempting to save us from whatever the danger is. And for many people, sympathetic actions will resolve the problem enough so that we can come back to ventral, right? We do that ventral sympathetic, ventral dance often. That we humans do it all the time. If sympathetic does not resolve the problem, we then land at the bottom of the hierarchy in dorsal. And dorsal is the place that trauma therapists found so interesting when Steve organized the theory, because so many of our clients end up in dorsal, which is this place of immobilization, disconnection, sort of not really here, right? Floaty, numb, untethered, right? Which is a very common trauma response. But before polyvagal theory, we had no way of understanding this other pathway. So that's the hierarchy: ventral, sympathetic, dorsal. And because it's a hierarchy, we understand when we're returning from dorsal, from that place of immobilization and shutdown, we have to find our way through some of the energy of sympathetic to get back to ventral. And that's so important for us to know as clinicians, that our clients don't just recover from this spacey, collapsed, disconnected place and come right to ventral, right? They come through some of that mobilizing energy of sympathetic. And our job is to help that not be a messy, out of control experience, not fight and flight. Because in sympathetic, that's where so many of the self-harming, self-critical, acting out messy behaviors live. So as our clients come through that, we don't want them stuck in that place. We want them simply to be able to feel some of that energy coming back in and keep moving up to ventral. And that takes us to the third organizing principle, which is co-regulation. And that's what we therapists are doing with our clients all the time. We are the regulated nervous system in the room, and we are offering that regulation to their nervous system, right? And I think about it that way. I know, everybody looks at it in their own way. I think my nervous system is communicating with their nervous system, and it's my responsibility to send the cues of safety and welcome in the way that their nervous system needs. And that's the lovely thing about working in this way, is that there's not a set way of doing it, right? There's not one way to send a cue of safety, right? If I was going to send a cue of safety to you, Jeffrey, you, Michael, and you, Kristen, it may be different for each one of your nervous systems. And so as a therapist understanding this, my job is to stay anchored in my own ventral regulation and explore, what does that nervous system need in this moment, right? That's the guiding question. What does that nervous system need in this moment? So if we know those three organizing principles, you're good to go, right?
I mean, I think that's fascinating. And for me, it's your voice. It was the minute you spoke, there was just this calm that I could experience, like in my heart area. And so
ventral pathway.
yeah,
right?
yeah. And it's so interesting. It's not necessarily the words that you said, it was just the rhythm of your voice. And I felt like regulated and maybe even too calm. Right. So I was like, oh, I need to wake up a little bit. I'm supposed to be interviewing here, not calming myself.
And I love that you said that, Kristen, because that's also something that we want to think about in our work with clients, is that we're looking for the right degree of challenge to offer their nervous system. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what we want to do is bring them to that place of calm where they can savor a moment, where they can really soak in the something they have just accomplished, or soak in the fact that we can feel safe together, nervous system to nervous system. And other times we want to stretch. So, my voice has to change. We have to do things a bit differently so that there's an invitation to your nervous system to come alive in a different way, right? So it's that stretch and savor that we do. Yeah.
So up and back, up and back.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk a lot about the optimal window of anxiety, that if the anxiety is too low, the person is not engaged. They're more, I guess, you would say, immobilization, more in that zone. If the anxiety is too high, they're flooded and they're dysregulated. But what we've learned over the years of our work together, I think all of us would agree on this, is that part of therapy is to bring the anxiety up to the just bearable threshold to begin to challenge the nervous system to be able to have a higher level of capacity. Would you agree with that optimal window of tolerance sort of model?
Well, it's interesting because the window of tolerance is, Dan Siegel's brilliant creation all those years ago. And when I made the move to Polyvagal Theory, and I was trained in IPNB before discovering Steve's work, when I made the move to Polyvagal Theory, I would tell my clients, we're going to close the window and we're going to climb on the ladder. Right? Because the window of tolerance in the middle does not accurately illustrate the hierarchy, right? It makes us think that we can go we go up to sympathetic and back, that we can go from dorsal hypo right back to ventral, and we can't do that. So I moved to the hierarchy, which depicted for my clients what their experience was, and they made that shift very easily. I'm not arguing with what you're saying, because I do believe what you're saying. I would, as a as a nervous system person, I wouldn't use the word anxiety. I would use activation probably, because we want the nervous system to activate a bit more or mobilize a bit more. But anxiety is more of for me, more of a sympathetic response. And what I'm looking for is, we're in ventral, and then we have this lovely piece of our biology called the vagal brake, which Steve probably talked about. And the vagal brake is this specific pathway that goes from the medulla to the sinoatrial node of your heart. And its job is to regulate heart rhythm, heart rate. And as we want more energy, the vagal brake releases a little bit. And so we have access to the sympathetic nervous system's energy, but we don't get taken into a survival response. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm talking about, because I was just thinking, even for a presentation, if my nervous system is not on a bit, I'm not going to prepare, I'm not going to be focused, I'm not going to be attuned, I'm not going to be on time. If it's too much, I'm going to have dry mouth, and I'm going to have trouble getting my words out and being, so while I'm feeling safe now, there is a bit of enough sympathetic activation to keep me on.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we want. Sympathetic is an important part of our system. It helps regulate heart rhythms, breath rhythms, brings us energy to move through the day. It's just, if it's not under the oversight of ventral, then it is a survival state instead. And it floods us with cortisol and adrenaline, and our prefrontal doesn't work, and all of those things.
Is it on or off? Is it on or off? Or is it?
No, I think everything is nothing's on or off. Because even when I'm in a survival state, I still have a ventral vagal system. It didn't go anywhere, right? It's still there. It's sort of, how much of it, or foreground, background, or those are the ways that I really think about it. And when the vagal brake is still there, still holding, I can be passionate and alert and ready and all of those things. And then when I go over the edge, so for you, when I would leave that optimal arousal zone, then I've lost the capacity to be here and be with you in the way I need. And I'm going to be in a sympathetic fight or flight. And then I may end up, for me, my profile, I think we have autonomic profiles built over years of moving into survival responses. And my autonomic profile is to go very quickly through sympathetic and end up in dorsal. I call this our home away from home. We all have a home away from home.
So it's activation and shutdown.
Yeah. I go quickly. I'm ventral and quickly. But I joke with my colleagues. I say I take the express elevator through sympathetic, right? You have to go through it. You can't go directly to dorsal, but I go really fast. I don't stay there long, and I land in dorsal. So that's my profile. And you each, maybe one of you is in that dorsal land.
What I'm noticing for myself is that when I have experienced that, it's very difficult for me to know that is what is happening to me. And so it's the people around me who have helped me see, oh, that's how you always are before a presentation, or you're just on you're on your creative edge, you're about ready to have like a creative breakthrough. And, when I was a child, I didn't grow up with that type of support. I was actually, expected to conform to whatever the family standards were. And so there was no one that was seeing me in that state, encouraging me in a positive way that it's just a part of my process. And so, I know with our patients, like, it's so important for us to be there and to just be able to see them and mirror back, like, what's happening, and then be encouraging, like, oh, this too shall pass, right? You're in process.
Yeah. And everybody's nervous system does this in some way. I think the normalizing of it is so important for our clients, and sharing our own nervous system with our clients, and I know that use of self and transparency is, everybody does it differently. When we're talking nervous system, it feels very important it also feels very boundaried and ethical to do that. And I would often tell my clients, I know that place that you're in right now. I visited that place, not for the same reason. I didn't have the same trigger, but I know
But
what that
because you're
feels.
human, right? Because
Right, we
we're
all
human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and also, I'd be curious to see what you have to say about this. I notice with my patients who have PTSD, a lot of times they have this high activation before they have releases, and they're really, able to finally break down and sob, or to finally, like, have a memory come to the surface and resolve it. But leading up to those breakthrough moments are really hard for them. And it's even hard for me to witness, because I'm starting to get anxious with them. And then these breakthroughs occur, which are quite beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, several things come to mind. One, for you, you recognize you're starting to get anxious. And that's a lovely thing for you to recognize, because that's telling your nervous system is telling you to anchor back in ventral, right? Because you're getting anxious gets communicated to their nervous system. Right. So if you're just sitting there going, I can hold this, right? I can hold this with them. I can be with them. Then that's what's getting transmitted to their nervous system. I imagine that's really what's getting transmitted to their nervous system, because you are helping them move through, and it can't resolve. You can't move through, you can't digest, or any of the words we use when we're, having a memory in it, and it then becomes part of a more coherent story. We can't do this unless we have enough anchor in ventral to allow that, because otherwise we get hijacked by the memory, which lives in sympathetic or dorsal. Our trauma memories don't live in ventral. Right. And when we can have enough ventral, yours and your clients, so that they can revisit and not get hijacked into, then they have this lovely release and resolution that happens. And that only can happen when there's ventral in the room. I used to tell my trainees, there has to be at least one ventral vagal system in the room, and it better be yours if you're the therapist, right? So that's really what we're doing. And then you are going with them. You're traveling with them, so that your ventral energy is available to them, and their nervous system knows that and feels that.
So it would seem that really getting therapists familiar with their ventral system is going to be critical for the therapy, because they have to be there to hold the place for themselves and help
Yeah.
the patients or clients get there. Yeah. So if you could talk about this, because I know that this, it's funny, that it's called ventral, because this is the ventral surface. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as we're talking today, this feeling of warmth and swelling and happiness and peace. I don't mean it in a hokey way, but I was looking at myself just kind of smiling there, and thinking,
yeah.
But I realized that a lot of things were happening that I don't think of as just, sympathetic, or unless I maybe need some clarification, because a lot of what I'm feeling is parasympathetic. I mean, my eyes tear as I'm happy this way. My voice gets deeper. And so if you could paint a picture of this ventral system and how it operates, it might be a real boon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you recognize that it really is the first responsibility is, what does my nervous system need in order to anchor in ventral? If I'm a therapist, that's where I have to start. And all of my training programs, clinicians come, they think they're going to learn how to do this with clients. And I say, before that, you have to learn about your own nervous system. That's where it begins. And ventral that we're experiencing here is, connected, the four of us, is really a lovely experience. Ventral is, one part of parasympathetic, dorsal being the other, right? And so when we're in that ventral energy, we feel, there are all sorts of flavors of ventral, but the glue that holds all of them together is a neuroreception of safety. right? That's really what it is. So we can be calm, playful, joyful, alert, not alarmed. Alarmed is sympathetic. I'm hypervigilant, alarmed, but alert and ready is ventral, right? There are all these flavors. And what we do, the very first thing we do in our training programs, and I invite clinicians to do with clients, is to fill out their personal profile map, right? Which is their way of getting to know. It's the befriending of your nervous system so that you understand what happens in your body. What do you think? What do you feel? What do you do? What are your core beliefs that emerge from that state? Because each state has its own emergent properties. And getting to know that is so important, because then when a client comes in and they say, oh, this is what I did this week and I am so ashamed, we can say, oh, so your nervous system initiated a survival response and took you to your sympathetic rage, and here's the outcome of it, right? We can map it. We can see how your wiring took you there. Doesn't mean you're not responsible still, and we do want to figure out how to interrupt that, but it puts it on a map where we can say that makes perfect sense, right? Because the cues of danger overwhelmed your system and there was no other outlet for you, right? And there was nobody there. As Kristen was saying, if we don't have people around us who can see us in our either regulated or dysregulated states and help us know that, be known in that way, then we're on our own. And we are not built to be on our own. We are just not built to move through the world on our own. And isn't that terrifying for trauma survivors to hear that, right? That we're wired for connection and our nervous system needs co-regulation with other humans in order to find well-being, right? Terrifying, right? So again, we are sometimes the first safe co-regulating being for our clients, all right? We are that, right? So it's important. I do want to say, because I know people are listening, pets are wonderful co-regulators. Pets, right? People, not so much in many of my clients' worlds in the beginning, but they had pets and it was wonderful. Yeah. So we get to know this ventral state and again, for people for whom, many of us may have struggled to be there recently or not spent a lot of time there. And when you're mapping, when you're getting to know your system, it doesn't matter. A micro moment is all you need. Everything you need to know about your nervous system and that ventral state is held in a micro moment. And
Can you
so
say
that's
more about what you mean by a micro moment? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, a micro moment is, sort of a quick burst when I notice, oh, I'm okay. And then maybe it goes. And for many of our clients, that dip into okayness, right, is all they get. They dip in and then it becomes terrifying to be okay. And so they come back. But we can grab those micro moments that we see in therapy or they report to us, those micro moments. You can say, that's all we need. So in that moment, let's begin to feel what happened in your body. What do you think? What do you feel? What do you do? That's all we need. And it's also reassuring to clients to know, and to us to know that we all visit ventral more often than we know. Right. When I was doing this with clients who were, complicated, complex trauma histories, and we would go, like frame by frame through a period of time. And there would be these micro moments of ventral that we could stop and identify. Oh, there's another one. There's another one, right? So in our work, we want to be looking for those in our sessions with our clients and noticing them, right? I call them glimmers. We have these glimmers, these sparks of ventral, and we can notice and name them with our clients. And what we're doing is we're not dismissing or discounting the trauma that they're holding and living with, but we're reminding them that their nervous system is able to both be in the trauma and have a micro moment of ventral, that the nervous system is exquisitely capable of doing both. It's a both and.
Can you give examples of, you gave one of a micro moment in terms of I'm okay, but in terms of I assume that they're, maybe wrongly, but that they're all kind of neuroreceptive events. And
Yeah.
how do they, what's some other examples? If you were to list a whole bunch of these
Yeah.
micro moments, what would it look like?
It's interesting, and I'll invite you each to think about the day you had today, and think you might come up with your own micro moments. If I look through my day today, I opened my sunroof because it was not pouring rain. Right? It was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's just a little thing, right? My cat jumped up just before I came downstairs to wish me good luck. Right? Okay. My husband is we had a moment where we had a quick connection, which was lovely. He's got some chronic illness going on, and that's not always the case. So there was this moment, right? There are these tiny things that happen. In the grocery store, I actually found this is a glimmer for me. I found the oranges that I was looking for. I was like, oh, wow, okay. They're little things, right? And yet what we know with the nervous system is these micro moments add up, right? If we notice them, name them, and mark them, they begin to find a place in our nervous system, and they begin to add up. So they're not just discrete micro moments. Right. And then we will reach a tipping point where our baseline ventral vagal capacity increases. So rather than being here, my baseline might be here. Right. And that's what we're working with our clients, to both increase their tonic vagal capacity and work with their phasic capacity, because both are so important. So as I was talking about my glimmers, did any of you come up with one you'd had today?
Yeah, I before we met, I walked past Aries Pond, which is right down the road from us, and looked out over the sailboats getting at their mooring now. And I just thought, wow, what a place to be.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. And that is something we might call a predictable glimmer, because you can go back there and see the sailboats. And those are wonderful with our clients, a predictable, repeatable glimmer. Then the invitation is, do you think you could do that again?
Yeah, better yet, I'll be able to get on my sailboat soon.
Even better. Well, that's bigger than a glimmer. That's a ventral experience.
That's right. That is, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it's not terrifying.
Right.
Would you call just the flexion of your fingers and the releasing and feeling all of the musculature of your body kind of all moving? It seems like more than a micro moment. That there's this tremendous pleasure from the movement.
Yeah, for you. And I love that you said that, because I also want to say that, we want to be very careful when we are talking about anything to do with the nervous system, to remember that I can't assume that what brings me to a state, whether it's a glimmer or survival state, will necessarily act the same way in your nervous system, right? So as you were talking about the releasing and the musculature and all that, I was with you for the very beginning, and then when you went deeper into the musculature and all that, my nervous system said no, thank you. Mm-hmm. Right? Because my system still struggles to be embodied fully. And so you went just a little bit too far for my system. And so it said, no, thank you, which was interesting for me to track. And that's what we're doing. We're tracking. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Kristen, it looked like yours was liking that.
I was liking it. And yep. But I actually have been told that by a football player that doing it too much and too tight was terrifying. Just terrifying, because it was almost like being asphyxiated.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. There's a sense of, as you talk about too tight or being trapped, yes, in a way, is a pretty predictable cue of danger to our nervous system, and will begin to take us to a survival response. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
So I think that these things flow and they're different, and
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
it's not just a list. It's a list that's very. Each person has to kind of find out what it is for them, and and you spoke about two different parts to this in terms of the tonic and then the
Basic, yeah.
phasic.
Yeah.
Could you talk
Yeah,
about
because
the phasic a
the
little bit?
phasic is really, how quickly can we return from a survival state? How we're looking at frequency, intensity, and duration, right? With phasic, we want to change the frequency, intensity, duration of our movement out of ventral into a survival state. And then we also want to, the tonic is increasing our capacity to be anchored in ventral.
So
Right.
I call that, I call that with my patients state shifts that,
Mhm.
that when you can fluidly make state shifts, and I think I like what you said about notice, name, and mark, because most people that I work with do not notice, do not name, and do not mark. All they know is that I've had a terrible dip in my. I had a dip, and I'm depressed and despairing, and it's like a micro moment, may last a couple of minutes, and it's terrifying. And that kind of state shift seems very common in patients that have complex trauma, who did not have the co-regulating attachments that we're talking about. So can you say a little bit more about how you work with people who are stuck in states that are linked to early trauma, but they have no narrative memory of that, but we know from the footprints left that this is a state memory from being neglected or being locked in a closet, whatever it was?
Yeah, it's a lovely exploration, isn't it? Because thankfully we don't need to know our stories in those details, right? And really, when we're working with the nervous system, the question is not what happened to you; it's how did your nervous system respond to what happened to you. And so even when you're doing an early initial assessment and your client is beginning to tell you their history, you're translating that to not, that they lived in a house with a alcoholic father and a absent mom. You're asking, and I would always interrupt and say, "Oh, so tell me, were you the kid that got really big and had to manage everything, or got in trouble all the time, or were you the kid that tried to fly under the radar and be invisible?" Right? Because that's really what I want to know. I really don't, not that, you have to say this in a certain way. What happened to you is not the focus of our treatment right now. How does your nervous system learn to survive it? Because those are the patterns that are there now. And, when a client comes and they're stuck in that dorsal depression, I think that's so hard for we clinicians to sit with. We want to pull them out. We want to get them out of that. And I often think we try to do that too soon, too quickly, right? That our job really is to go be with them in that place, anchored in our ventral, but be with, because the experience in dorsal is one of being lost, alone, abandoned. My clients would tell me, where no one is ever going to find me. No one is ever going to come rescue me here.
And
so
it's excruciatingly painful. I mean, it's
Yes.
excruciatingly painful
Yes.
for people who are stuck in that for any length of time.
Yes. And what's
And
the
of course,
antidote?
we want to pull them out.
Right.
But I think
But
you're right that to be able to tolerate that without
Right, and
panicking
that's up to
ourselves.
us. We have to be able to tolerate it, because the antidote to that place is knowing you are not alone, that you are seen and connected with another human, right? And because my home away from home is dorsal, I'm very comfortable there. And so I think, I would tell, my clients, I have autonomic credibility. Your nervous system knows that my nervous system knows this place well. And when I tell you I can be here with you and we will find our way out of it, maybe not today, but we will, you can trust that, right? Because that comes from my personal nervous system experience. And so, we have to get comfortable. And for people for whom dorsal is a foreign land, for clinicians for whom dorsal is a foreign land, you need to go find a colleague who does have a good experience with dorsal, who understands it, and begin to work with them and understand, how do I meet you in that place? Because that's what your clients need. They need you to come. I would sit next to my clients and say, I'm here with you. I'm anchored in my ventral, and my ventral energy is sending a message to your nervous system. And
But this is so important, because I think we're so prone to say, let me write you a prescription.
Right.
I can't tolerate you being in here. You need a prescription. You got to get this right away. Just stop at the drugstore and get it right away, because we can't let you be here.
And what that prescription does is it brings their sympathetic online. It doesn't bring ventral. No prescription is going to take you to ventral. It's going to bring your sympathetic online, right? Which is like another problem altogether. So yes, if we can tolerate sitting with, being with, and, I had clients who would, week after week, right? And I would leave my office and go to my colleague's office and bang my head on the wall, right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's year after year.
Right. And in order to do that, you have to have your own support network. You have to have people who are going to say, oh, I get it, right? What do you need? What does your nervous system need to be able to do this again next Wednesday at 2, right? Absolutely. And those clients who are stuck in deep dorsal, I had clients who would tell me they'd gone down the dorsal drain, because it's that feeling of being stuck down the drain, right? And
I like that.
Yeah, right. There are these moments, that's when you're looking for a tiny micro moment that is different, right? And I would notice, oh, I just noticed that your nervous system brought a little bit of energy to your finger.
And how does
Right?
how does that tell us how that builds? Like, I get what you're saying, but how do you think that builds a different state capacity?
One, I think I would not say, I noticed you moved your finger, because that's too much for the nervous system. But I noticed your nervous system brought a little energy to your finger is a very different experience for a client, right? And what I'm telling them is your nervous system is stirring a bit. You don't have to do anything. Your nervous system is beginning to just stir in these tiny ways, and we're just going to keep noticing that. Sometimes there'll be because usually it's this slump down, face down, head down posture, and there'll be this tiny peak up, right? And I noticed that, right? Oh, and now there was this moment where your nervous system wanted to make sure I was still here, right? Looked up to make sure I'm here. I'm right here with you, right? So it's all that sort of conversation that begins to find its way in, and the nervous system begins to do a little more of it. Yeah, that's what I notice. I don't know why, but that's what I notice.
So the more that I hear you speak, the more I want to ask you, is this what we used to call neuropsychotherapy, using the language of the nervous system as a framework that's non-pathologizing? Grigsby and Stevens and those people who wrote about neuropsychotherapy.
Yeah, I mean, probably, yeah, because it is, when we're talking about the nervous system, talking to the nervous system, it is non-shaming, non-blaming, non-pathologizing. We talk about diagnosis. Most any diagnosis in the DSM is a nervous system that is dysregulated in a specific way, right? And that's what we're working with our clients. Your nervous system is dysregulated. Let's see if we can find our way to bring more regulation. And clients would come with their presenting problem, right? Whatever that is. And I would say, I wonder if we could put the presenting problem over here for a moment, because I'd like to work here and then bring the presenting problem back, and let's see how we think about it now. Right? Because if I get pulled into working with that thing that brought them to therapy and can't do this work, I'm not going to get anywhere. And usually clients are interested in that, because if they begin to get to know their nervous system, they're hooked. It's a different story that we're listening to, right? And they've told their trauma story a gazillion times, and they can tell it without really being connected with it, or they can tell it being hijacked by it. But the nervous system story is a very different story. And I find that people are interested in that story and seeing how that story, how that's the state, has then brought these other stories to life, right? Because we know state creates story, right? There's this thing that happened, and then the state, Steve calls it the intervening variable. Something happens, and then our state
I like that.
comes to
State
life.
creates story.
Yeah, state creates story. And then out of that comes, these emergent properties. I tell my clients that all the time, state creates story. The brain's job is to get the information that's coming from the nervous system, right? It gets fed up to the brain, and the brain's job is to make sense of it in some kind of story. And boy, can't we make up crazy stories, right? All in service of trying to serve our survival and make some kind of sense about what's going on. Yeah.
Well, you have, a huge mass of nerves sitting in the middle of your chest, all these autonomic ganglia, and all of your physiologic functions that are keeping you alive are coursing through there, and everything from your GI tract to your breathing to your heart, and all these things and people are running all the time for help with the various things they're feeling here. And they, they're feeling, is this an ulcer? Is this reflux? Is this just this, that? Or am I having a heart attack? Or is some other undiagnosed COVID-related syndrome? And so people are very, very worried about these sensations if they feel them. Not everyone feels them, but the majority seem to feel something. But the labeling of it is almost like a mystery. And it's like and each specialist has their own special way of looking at it, and therapists have a way, and Reichians used to listen with a stethoscope for bowel movements, bubbles and things, and gurgles, and but so this people have been aware that there's something going on here. Now, do you work with all these sensations, and it's very positive from your perspective that they feel them, and whatever it is, it's gold. But people often are really terrified of this stuff. So I was wondering what you do to help them with their, but how do I know it's not this? Or gee, I better go to the doctor. I better go to the ER right now, because these things are terrifying when they really get strong.
They're terrifying, and I always invite people to. The nervous system is trying to tell us something, right? And so let's find out how we can listen, which doesn't mean we don't go to medical people to rule out any of the big things. Absolutely got to do that, but once we've done that, then okay. It's like clients who have a lot of sympathetic anxiety, right? And so their heart starts beating a little faster, and they immediately go to the anxiety, something bad is happening, survival response, where if we can sit with that for a minute, we can say, let's, if we've done the map, let's see, this could fit in sympathetic, survival on your map. It might also fit in your ventral experience. It might be excitement. Right. And so to play around with, and one of the things, when I had an office, so if people actually have offices, is, we have different places, actual physical different places. And we can do that online, where you have two different chairs, and one's your ventral state and one's your sympathetic. And you're starting to feel the heart race. Go sit in your ventral chair, see what happens. And then go sit in your sympathetic. Notice what happens, right? Because our states bring very different stories. And that's one of the practices I do, is listening to the stories of each of your states. And so from sympathetic, if you listen to the sympathetic experience, I'm going to die, right? I need to immediately go to the doctor. And let's go to the dorsal experience where there's no energy to run your system, right? It's hopeless. Give up. Don't even think about this. And then come to ventral, where we have energy and we're organized and okay enough to move through the world. We can have a bit of curiosity, right? It might be my heart, or it might be, that I have a bit of energy and excitement at the moment, right? Let me explore, right? Nothing about the heart rhythm has changed, but the different states have three very different stories. And that's an exercise I do with my clients all the time, right? Because at any given time, we have access to at least 3 stories, and they're very different stories because each state has its own way of seeing. So, that's one of the things that I do when people begin to become embodied, again, right? And start feeling all these things. It can be terrifying, right? It can be. It's like listening to the nervous system and understanding that we're always, moving in these subtle shifts and sometimes big ones. You can't not know that once you know it, and that can be overwhelming, right? It can be overwhelming for clinicians and clients.
And also liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. 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 It's that invitation to turn toward and keep turning toward and keep listening and creating I call it befriending. And when you make a friendship, you don't just make a friendship and then not do anything with it. You nurture that friendship. So it's the same thing with our nervous system. We nurture the connection. We nurture the relationship. We get to know more. Yeah.
So I have a question from one of our viewers. For a client who has a lot of trauma and usually presents as very happy, high functioning, very positive, and then every so often has severe violent thoughts or severe crying spells, where would he be on the ladder, and how would you proceed in treating? Great question. Thank you.
It is a great question. The first thing I would do is I would do the personal profile map with this client and begin to get a sense of what ventral and sympathetic really look like, and dorsal too, because he must go to dorsal sometimes as well. But oftentimes we see high functioning clients who are surviving in sympathetic and not getting nourished in ventral. And so the clients who are very productive, or always on the move, or always doing things, or this sort of, but you can feel the drivenness of the energy rather than an energy they're seeking but never get satisfied, right? So they're always in that sympathetic place and never reach that ventral place of being able to take it in and savor the success. And then with this client, when the big moments of total sympathetic overwhelm come, that's just an intense sympathetic response of crying or raging or whatever, that even the level of sympathetic that this client is able to hold most of the time has been overwhelmed. And then they're going to go to this bigger sympathetic. And it may be, I'd be curious to know if that client then ends up in dorsal collapse, right? Because one of the things that dorsal does for us is to rescue us from the overwhelm of sympathetic that we just can't escape, right? And then one of sympathetic's jobs is to pull us out of dorsal. So it's this tension that goes back and forth between the two states.
So is ventral restorative? Is that where we experience restoration of self and of system?
Yeah. Ventral brings the capacity for the system to feel nourished again and to fill. Sympathetic and dorsal are draining. Ventral is filling. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm confused because how is crying sympathetic?
Well, crying crying can emerge from any state, right? If it is this intense
Sobbing,
crying that never gets you anywhere, that doesn't move through, that can be sympathetic. If we sat with clients who have this sobbing that feels hopeless and just drains the energy, dorsal. Crying from ventral is an experience that we connect with deep sadness, deep grief, and we're able to then, I don't know, metabolize it in some way because ventral is there to help us be with it safely. In ventral, you can be with, or when you have enough ventral circulating, you can be with the suffering differently, and you can be informed by it. And that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So when a client comes to you and says, "Wow, I spent all week crying," it's like, "Oh, tell me more," because I have no idea what that means. Right? Other than you cried, I have no idea what state that emerged from or what that means. So tell me more.
So, well, if you just see tears in their eyes,
If it
what's
feels,
the mix there?
if
'Cause
it,
I don't see
so-
it.
yeah. So
What am I missing?
if it feels like something that I want to notice, I'm simply going to notice. I notice there's some tears in your eyes. What state is sending you those? Because I don't know, right? And I'm not going to make an assumption, right? I'm not going to. So just what state is sending you those, or what state are those tears emerging from? Because my client's going to tell me they know, right? I always, say with clinicians, ask, well, how do I know? Ask your client, ask their nervous system. Their nervous system knows, and will tell you and give you all the information you need.
So what are some of the sample answers that would help lead you in one direction or another? Because obviously you can cry because your kid's getting married, or you can cry because somebody you cared about is dying. But there's these mixed feelings of
Absolutely. Yeah.
love and loss, or in both of them.
That bittersweetness, right? Yeah.
How does that fit in with this?
And again, as long as there is enough ventral in my system so that I can be with that deep sadness, and even that deep sadness may take me. I was watching a movie the other night, and I just was crying because it touched a place inside me, and then it became not about the movie but about this place inside me, and it was fine because I had enough ventral to really be with it in that way, right? I didn't get just taken away into the grief in a way that I couldn't be with it, right? And so that's always the question we're asking, and we're considering, is there enough ventral in my client system so that this is useful, this is moving us somewhere, right? Because I think my job when a client has gone to a survival state is to notice that, name that, and the work stops. The work becomes something different, right? The work becomes now, what does that nervous system need in this moment? And it's not always to come back to ventral.
So we're going to have to stop in a few minutes, Deb. Can you give our listeners most people that are watching are medical people or clinicians. Can you give them some wisdom, some more wisdom? Because you've given us a lot. I've written down a lot of what you said, and I will use it in my practice when I go back to work. Is there anything you would like to let our viewers know that would help them do this work?
I'll go back to the basics that I preach all the time, that no matter what way you are trained, you're engaging with the client's nervous system. So it is important for you to understand how the nervous system is organized and be able to communicate with your client's nervous system, and to remember that your nervous system is communicating all the time. We are having an autonomic communication all the time. And if we don't understand that, and if we aren't taking care of our end of that communication, we are doing our clients a disservice. I think that's really what I would say. So, getting to know our own system and be able to regulate, knowing when we leave regulation, because we all do, all of us within a session, we have moments when we get dysregulated, knowing when we leave, being able to come back to regulation, and mainly, most of the time in my work, naming that for my client. It's because I know their nervous system noticed it. So I'm going to name it. Say, oh, I had a moment when I get pulled out of connection with you. but now I'm back, right? Because I want to give them the accurate information, because trauma survivors are going to make up a very different story, right? So that, I think, would be what I would invite people to play around with.
Well, Deb, I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, expertise, and knowledge with us. And I hope our viewers will look into your work and learn more and maybe get some training with you. And I want to thank all the viewers for watching. We're going to stop the recording now. And people who want to watch it in the future, you can go and tell your colleagues about it. We're going to hang around for a little while and do our debrief. So we're going to turn the recording off, stop this session officially, but be alert for, we have a great cast of people coming up that we'll be interviewing over the next few months. So just keep apprised of our on our website. So thank you, Deb, and thank you, Kristen and Michael. We'll stop here and we'll continue our discussion.